When we think about evil people, Ted Bundy is probably one of the first names we think of. We've all heard the name, we all know the story, but for a lot of people, his name is much more personal. And for those that would be the victims' family, even Bundy's family, and especially those who had encountered Ted Bundy and lived to tell about it. Now, today we're talking to Connie, and she has a terrifying story of encountering Ted Bundy. So let's get to the interview. Hi, Connie. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
How are
So,
you?
first off, can you tell us where you were living at the time and how you encountered Ted Bundy?
I live in Yelm, Washington, where I grew up. I'm back here now, and I encountered him at a lake. Um, I want to start this out by premising what happened prior to this because it's how I got from here to there.
Sure.
I had got a hand-me-down swimsuit from my cousin, and it was a two-piece and wrapped a towel around myself. My mom said, "We're off to the lake." And let me say that my mom, we took us swimming every chance she had. We'd swim in lakes and puddles or rivers or whatever. And in the wintertime, we would swim at the Y. We just swam all the time. And so she said, "We're going to the lake," and we would stay for hours on end. She loved to swim. She just passed away 3 weeks ago at the age of 94. So it's been
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of
sorry
hard.
to hear that.
Anyway, that's okay. And so off to the lake we went. And when I dropped my towel and she saw that I was in a two piece, she accused me of wanting to pick up guys. And I was like kind of horrified by that. I was only 14 years old. I didn't understand because I just kind of wanted to look more like my Barbie doll collection, you know, with the bra
Sure.
through it all. I was a little skinny 14-year-old, and she hurt my feelings. So I decided, well, maybe I'll just go off by myself and I'll go find a place to not get yelled at. And I saw way down the beach there was a tree. So I wandered down the shoreline and I just kept going and going and going. And there was a tree growing out of the sand. And I thought, well, that's a perfect place. I'm just going to go sit there. I had a towel. I had a little transistor radio. They're kind of like the size of a pack of cigarettes, I
Mhm.
guess you'd say, like the same thickness and everything. And I thought, well, I'm going to try to see if I can get any music going on this. And I sat under the tree and I was fiddling with that. And behind me, I heard in the rustling in the trees, and I thought, oh, that sounds like a deer, but it could be a bear or a cougar. So you better turn around
Mhm.
and look. And so I did. I turned around, and a man just stumbled right on out. And I thought that was weird because there was a lot of underbrush and stuff like that. But on the other side of that strip of trees, there was a parking lot. So, I guess that's where he came from. Um, and I sat down under the tree, and he walked down to the shoreline, and he started doing like this, and he's looking up and down, and he puts his hands on his hips, and I'm like, what's going on here? And he eventually made his way back to me, and I didn't say anything. I was just like, who's this? Why did you come out of the trees? And he said, "Hi, I'm the lifeguard." And I thought, well, this is a parks department, no lifeguards here. And he had this bright yellow plastic whistle around his neck, and it was tied with like a bootlace. And from my experiences with all the swimming we did, they always had the yellow, the metal
Yeah.
whistles on a chain bag. But I was just like, okay, whatever. And he said, "Yeah, we're new." And because I asked him, I said, "Well, there's no lifeguards here. This is Parks Department." And he said, we're new. They just hired us. Too many problems with drowning. And I'm okay, whatever. And then he just kind of just wouldn't go away, just stood there. He was kind of behind the tree at this point. And I guess maybe hiding from, he could see my mom. We weren't the only ones at the lake. It was late August and everybody was home getting ready for school. So that's kind of when we stopped swimming around here and things like that. So he finally he kind of kneels down, gets in my face, and he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Connie." And he said, "Hi, I'm Ted." And I said, "Ted, right?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, I said, "Well, is that short for something? Because I'm first time I ever met a Ted." And he said, "That's short for Theodore." And I said, "Theodore?" And I giggled and I laughed. And I said, "Okay, uh, that's funny." As a funny, and he goes, "Well, if you think that's funny, my last name's Bundy." And I said, "Theodore Bundy?" And I'm laughing and laughing. And I said, "You made that up. You made it up." I was convinced he made that name up. Who would have thought Theodore Bundy was an actual name? And after that, he just wouldn't go away. He was literally in my face. He knelt down on one knee. He's in my face. He's asking me a million questions. You know,
Was there
where did I
was there
live?
anything threatening about him at from the beginning?
No, not at that point. And he said, I'm here. I'm the lifeguard, and you're the only one here, so I might as well talk to you. Or, where do you live, and what do your parents do, and where's your mom, and what, like, do you go to school? What's your grades like? No, boy, I don't feel like answering all these questions because I had just had this big argument with my mom, and I just wanted to be left alone, just leave me alone. And he said, and he just wouldn't stop. It just, and then he'd get up and he'd wander around a little bit, like just in a circle, like he was checking the lake. And then he went again, like really close. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. This is something I've never experienced. Somebody getting in your space that close. And he just wouldn't leave me alone. And it just went on and on and on. Eventually started getting a little darker. He started asking, I don't know if it was inappropriate questions, but he just wouldn't let it go. And I was kind of getting crabby, and I eventually, this went on for almost 3 hours.
Jeez.
So it's a long time. So I said, "I'm going to go back to where my mom is." And he goes, "Where's your mom?" I go, "That's her, but she was way down at the other end of the lake." And I said, "I'm going to go back." And he said, "Before you go back, you have to get in the water." And I said, "I'm not going swimming today." And he said, "Well, you're going to get in the water." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And I got up and tried to go back to where my mom was, but he prevented me from doing that. He clotheslined me. He tripped me. I, he tried to, well, at first he tried to get me up, but I knew I wouldn't. And he dug his fingernails into my skin. He was just, he would grab me by my skin and pinch me and pull really hard. And I was like, what are you doing? I just want to go back to my mom." And he just wouldn't let it happen. And he said, "You're going to go swimming. I'm the lifeguard, and I want to say that I at least protected one person today," type thing. And after that, I he I mean, that just went on for an hour. And finally, I said, okay, I'll swim out to the dock. There was a floating dock and a lake that was more boating and fishing. It really wasn't a swimming lake. And the box was like perfectly square and flush on the sides. It had a ladder and hooks for where you could tie up your boat, but it didn't, it wasn't a swimming lake. So I said, I'll swim out to the dock, I'll swim back, and then you'll let me go to my mother. And he said, yes. And I did that. I started to swim, but before I got to the dock, he passed me like zoom. And I wasn't at the ladder yet. And he got up on the ladder and he sat backwards with it, face. And I tried to get up and he was on the ladder. And he started kicking me like in the face and stuff. And it was a little bit of a swim, and I was already exhausted from being chased around the beach area all that time. And he said, um, and he was just laughing the whole time. I got to tell you, from start to finish, all he did was grin or laugh. Even when he was asking me questions, when he said, "Hi, I'm Ted. Hi, I'm a lifeguard," he was just grinning the whole time. And I was like, this is kind of bizarre. So I went around to the side of the dock, and it was so flush, and it was a long reach, like as far as I could reach from the water, to put my fingers on the top. And he jumped up and he started stomping on my hands. And I said, I had to let go. I went back down into the water, and he just wouldn't let me. So I went around to the back, hoping there was something in the back that I could hold on to. And there was nothing on the back that there was on the side. So I finally get to the back. And by the time I get around there, he's on his stomach and he's looking down at me. He's literally hanging over. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So what I did was he said, I tried to reach up and he threw my hands away. And then he said, oh, I'm sorry. It was just, I was just joking with you. I was just having fun today. And he said, here, let me reach down and I'll grab you by the arm and I'll pull you up. And I was like, you're not going to hurt me anymore, are you? Because I was like all banged up by that time. And I reached up to grab his arm, and he reached down and grabbed my hair like this. And I was like, oh my God, what now? And he shoved me under the water. And he held me there for a good minute. I was under the water. And I was like, this guy's going to try to kill me. That's when I realized how much trouble I was in. I said, um, when he pulled me out, I said, what are you doing? I thought you were a lifeguard. And he's just laughing and laughing and laughing. And one thing that he didn't know was when we went to the Y to go swimming in the winter, I would get so bored that I would go underwater because there's a big clock and see how long I could hold my breath. And I could hold my breath almost 2 minutes.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that is one thing I think saved me. And so he just pulled me out, and I thought, okay, I could breathe a little bit of air. Maybe I'm going to be okay. Maybe I'm not. And then all of a sudden, boom, back under the water I went. And after that, I didn't know what to do. I was like, this is it, because now the minute is ticking away. And so I thought, well, maybe if he thinks that I drowned, that he'll just let go and go away. And so I threw my arms out and I threw my head back. I opened my eyes. My body floated and I hit the dock. And then he said, um, he didn't, I mean, he didn't say anything, but I could see I was about 3 inches under the water because it was a long reach even for him. So I was about 3 inches or 4 inches under the water, but I could see him clearly. And his face was just twisted. I want to say it looked like the worst case of varicose veins you've ever seen in somebody's face. And because he was hanging down, I could see that his teeth were all gnarled. And then I looked at his eyes and they looked like two giant black marbles. There was no white, no color, no nothing. I never seen anything like it. So after that, I didn't know what to do. So I had went to survival camp earlier that summer, and they said when in doubt, play dead, and that's why I did it. And I saw no way out of it until I hit the dock, and I thought, if I can just get under the dock, I'm going to be okay. I can get under there and breathe and maybe buy enough time to get away. And so the only way to go is down. I'm not going to get away from him if I go up. So I grabbed under the dock and I shoved as hard as I could, ripping my hair out. So then I was going down, but by that time I had lost so much air. I had nothing left, and I kept going because I pushed so hard. It was going down, 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 down. And I thought, I can't go down even another 3 inches or I'm never going to make it back up. I had nothing left. My lungs were on fire. I'm thinking I can't make it back up. And then all of a sudden I hit the bottom. My feet hit the bottom. So what I did was I took my feet and I flipped them so that they would propel me upward. And I headed straight up under the dock. And I got under the dock and I started to breathe, and then I started to scream. And then I heard him run across the dock, and there was a crack where the ladder was facing towards the beach. And he took off and he dove in the water and he just swam, and then he grabbed his stuff and then he ran back into the woods.
Jeez.
But this is a really tough time for me because this is being filmed during when all those kids are drowning. It's just devastating because if you've ever come that close to drowning, you would understand.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing.
That's
Now, once he took off, what went through your mind? I mean, did you realize how closely you had come?
oh yeah. By the time he actually he when he pulled me out the first time, he said, "See, I'm a good lifeguard." I thought,
That's
oh,
that's
he's nuts.
psychotic.
Yeah, it was totally psychotic. And in other words, he was proving to me that he saved my life by pulling me out the first time. But then after he started talking about, see what a good lifeguard I am. I did my duty. I did my job. Boom, back under the water. But that time he had no intention to let me out. And yeah, I already knew I was going to die.
Oh,
I was going to die. One way or another, he was
well,
going to
I'm
kill me.
glad you got away. I mean, just
And
knowing being able to hold your breath for that long probably saved it.
yeah,
Now,
for
what year
sure.
did this happen? Okay.
1967. I was 14 years
Now,
old.
do you believe that he started killing a lot sooner than what people commonly say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one of my pet peeves. And it's one of the reasons that I decided to do this podcast is because I looked him up the other day and everything suggests, oh, He didn't start killing until 1974. This was 1967, and with the exception of one of his little neighbor girls that went missing, according to some 1961 or 1962, that she
Mhm.
went missing. She lived next door, and her window was open. She was gone, and her body has
No.
never been found. And that was in the early 1960s. So I think what I'd like to see is I'd like to see somebody go through the police files, cold cases, even drownings, or maybe somebody fell off a cliff. Maybe they found all these young girls. But I'd like to see them come up with a list of people they think he might have killed, because I think there's a lot, especially in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that too, and there's a lot of people that, you know, it's it was kinda common belief that he started in the '70s, but you don't start doing that stuff without having some kind of a path of, previous crimes and all that kinda stuff. I mean, even listening to the interviews that he gave, he kind of admitted to the fact that it was a progressive thing, that it started earlier in life,
Hmm.
and, I definitely think that he probably started years before anybody even realized it.
I totally agree. Well, his little neighbor girl was 8 years old. He was 14.
Yeah, and that's the first time that anybody kind of rewound the clock and thought, "Okay, this might have been his first crime," but nobody knows how many crimes he might have committed between then and, like, '74.
Hmm. Well, I didn't know myself until later that, see, I had in 1969, I had moved from Washington State to New Jersey. And so did he the same year. He moved to New Jersey, South Jersey too. And um, I thought, I didn't really know about Ted Bundy, the serial killer, because I was attacked in 1967.
Mhm.
They all claim he didn't start doing any, he did nothing wrong until 1974. And I was in New Jersey where it wasn't making a whole lot of news back there, I guess. And I had just gotten married again. And by 1986, my husband broke his neck. It was a quadriplegic.
Mm.
And so my hands were full. I wasn't paying attention to trials and, you know, whatever was going on. And if they were mentioning Ted Bundy, I just, in my mind, it was Theodore Bundy.
You
My
definitely would have
mom,
remembered the name.
right? My mom wouldn't let me go to the police. I begged her. I said, I've got this guy's name and everything, Mom. He just tried to drown me. But she said, you ruined our day at the lake. We're all going home. Shut up, shut up. So
See, and
we went,
victim shaming is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't come forward.
right, exactly.
Yeah, that's a pretty sad thing because a lot of people, especially people like him, probably could have been put away a long time ago, but people make them feel bad, like they were the ones that did something wrong, and that
Mhm.
just isn't the case.
Right. Oh, I totally agree. And in 19, yeah, she wouldn't let me say anything. And I could have put his full name on the police. I mean, they would have had to make a report. Even
Yeah,
if the report didn't come out until 1974 and somebody looked through it and went, hey, that name sounds familiar,
there would have been a record.
there would have been some kind of record, but she refused to allow me to talk to the police. So,
Yeah, that's
um,
pretty sad.
yeah,
So
it was
when
like, oh,
Jeez. So when you first made that correlation then between the person that attacked you and the person that was known to be a massive serial killer, how did that make you feel?
I was shocked. Well, it was in the 90s. I started having these recurring dreams, and I dreamt I could breathe underwater. And I would say to my friends, did you ever have a dream where you could breathe underwater? And they would go, no. And I go, why? So I kind of thought about it for a really long time. I'm like, nobody has ever had a dream like this before. And why am I having these dreams that I would find myself underwater and I couldn't breathe, and all of a sudden I gasp and realize, oh, you're fine, and I'd be swimming past the fish. I mean, I was underwater, and um, it was really bothering me. And I thought, I wonder if it's that time when I was almost drowned by that guy back in Washington State. So by this time goes by, I've picked up a book by Anne Rule. I
Mhm.
contacted her, and she contacted me back, and she asked me an awful lot of questions. And she wrote "The Stranger Beside Me" because
Yeah.
she worked with him in that. Um, I don't know, somewhere she worked with him. Anyway, so I talked to her, and she asked me a lot of questions like what color was his hair, what, how tall was he at, and I told her what I could. And she goes, I'm pretty convinced because you live right in the area. I was actually born in the town he lived in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's how close we are. And I lived between the town he lived in and the town he worked in. So there's only two ways to get there, and there were so many correlations. And she was like, yeah, she said because his neighbor, she was the one who first told me that the little neighbor girl went missing in 19, I think she said 62. My research says 61, so I don't really know.
Yeah, definitely a long time before anything else happened.
Mhm, mhm. um and then so after talking to her, I knew it was him. And I said his name was Theodore Bundy, and I said I didn't see the Theodore Bundy until I read your book. And, she was pretty convinced that, yeah, I did have that run in with Theodore Bundy. And that's what I realized. But by then, I feel it was 2007 when I finally contacted her. I mean, all because I kept having those
Yeah.
dreams from the 90s all the way up until 2007. And after I contacted her, the dreams completely went away.
Wow.
Now weird.
Well, the mind definitely plays tricks on you like that,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
that certainly is not
it
something
does.
that you would forget.
Oh, no, you never forget it. It's like yesterday,
So, how
you
did
know.
this whole experience affect you long term?
Well, I said this in another podcast I did, but I don't. That day I stopped swimming. I don't won't take a bath, like get it submerged in water.
Well,
I mean, I'll just maybe put my feet in or something, but I won't get all
no, it makes
wet.
sense though.
It definitely caused PSTD. And yeah, you don't forget
Yeah, it's
it.
different.
You're always afraid that you're going to slip and fall or be pushed or get under that water and you're not going to be able to
No,
get
yeah,
out.
certainly understandable. So, how did you feel when you actually found out a little bit more about him, and then you found out that he was sentenced to death?
I didn't know. I like I said, my husband, I don't know when he was executed. Do you know?
Was it? No,
Late 80s or
I want to say like
90s.
89 or 90.
Yeah. So my husband had broke his neck in 1986. He was a quadriplegic, completely paralyzed from the neck down. And I had two jobs, two kids, and a paralyzed husband.
Jeez.
And I wasn't watching the news. Sorry, just wasn't. So I didn't really know anything about him. Like I said, it wasn't until 2007 that I really got all the clues put together. I couldn't, I never thought it was him. Even when I found out, I thought he attacked me in 1967, but everything says he didn't go on this killing spree until 1974. And I kept thinking, I'm wrong, you know, Just shut up about it. You're wrong. And when I talked to Ann Rule, she convinced me that I was probably 100% right, that it was him. And I know it was him. I could pick him out of a lineup. His name was Theodore Bundy. Come on, you know. And so when I found out that he was, even back then, I mean, he was more known for the sorority
Mhm.
killings than he was for all the people he killed in Washington State, Oregon, Idaho, wherever, Utah. Um, and I was living back east, so it really wasn't until recently how much he is a part of our lives, no matter whether we want him in it or not.
Absolutely.
I swear to you, last week I've heard his name 4 times. He was on the news. I mean, like anytime somebody wants people or somebody's sick or mental or whatever, they
His name is one of the
automatic
first that comes up.
Bundy every time.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
started to bother me. And I just kind of felt like I actually made some notes. You know, he was sick, and I also found out he has fan clubs, and
And that's kinda crazy to think about because Jeffrey Dahmer did too, and a lot of these guys,
mhm,
there's people that seem to have some kind of a fascination with them, and I've never understood the psychology of that, but it's a weird thing.
yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, I I actually did one other podcast about 3 years ago, and I had a guy contact me. To He said it took me 2 years to find you. How crazy is that?
That's kinda weird.
And so yeah, it was weird. There, and then so I want to go back to the 1960s when I think he was killing, because in 1967 when he attacked me, that was the height of the Vietnam War and the hippie movement, and there was so many women left behind, and because all the young men were getting drafted. So I looked it up. Why didn't he get drafted? I mean, he should have taken Vietnam. But if apparently he used some kind of ruse that he had a old ankle injury. Really? So I think that was fake too.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the amount of things that he got away with, between the arm cast and all he always found a way to be the victim or to appear like the victim, and he used that to his advantage for years.
Right. He would use arm sling, walk with crutches, pretend to be a police officer. For
Mhm.
me, he was a lifeguard. I mean, even back in 1967, he had, a costume.
Yeah, so it's definitely something that went back a long period of time, and he kinda used that as part of his MO, and he stuck with it over the years.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a pretty creepy thing.
So you wanted to know how I found out he was a serial killer. Well, serial killer wasn't that because of Bundy? They came up with the
It might have
he was the
been.
one. Yeah, he was the
I mean,
one.
it wasn't as actively, used of a phrase before that.
Mm-mm. No, it was never used. They came up with the term because of Bundy. So the term wasn't
Oh,
around until he was. And as I get older, like, okay, I'm not old enough, 71, right? But as I get older, I think to myself, God, his name is popping up more has in my whole life. I
yeah, it
don't.
definitely is.
It just pops up out of the blue. just everywhere.
Well,
And every time, like I said,
anytime there's a new case that comes around, I mean, everybody gets compared to him.
mhm. I don't think there's any comparison to Bundy. That's why I wish they kept him alive. And I know people like this, but in him, so different because you look at people like Dahmer or who was the clown guy. I mean,
Oh,
he,
Gacy.
the yeah, Gacy, Johnny Gacy, but he was
Mhm.
also a killer. But and Dahmer seemed to want to make them, so he claimed, part of
Yeah.
him, from what I understand, cannibal. The reason for why they killed these certain people, but there is nothing out there on Bundy,
No, and
and to see him,
he came from a loving house, he had 2 parents, he was
yeah,
not abused, he didn't have any of the same symptoms that the usual person that would follow that course had. So it kinda makes you wonder, should they have studied him more?
mhm. Well, obviously he wasn't about to let them study him, but I
No.
think I think that if they'd have thrown him in the cooler there for a long time, he might have come out and said something. Or,
Well, you'd like to hope that
you
somebody like that would have
know,
said something because there's very few examples like him that would help gain insight into the way their mind works. I mean, the psychology of it is fascinating by itself.
absolutely. I think his mind was so different than everybody else. He planned these out. He made it was a theater to him. He dressed up for the part. I mean, even to the whistle. He or his police badge or whatever he wanted to be. I mean, this guy just must have sat all day long and thought, "Oh, gee, how can I attract someone to kill today by dressing it up or having?" I boggles the mind. I mean, he
Now,
was
here's oh, go ahead.
no, I'm
Well, I was just curious if, a lot of people can watch films on this, they can watch documentaries, all that kind of stuff, but you actually looked into his face. Now, do you think that he felt anything when he was trying to attack you?
no, absolutely not. He was a statue, just a rock. He was. He didn't. He wasn't even looking at me. He was looking through me. So thinking back, I
That's
realized
creepy.
that. Yeah, he looked through me the whole time. I mean, he just had a stare. But when those eyes went pure black, say that was the most frightening thing I have ever seen in my life. There's a couple people who said the same thing about other serial killers that they ran into.
Mhm.
It surprised me that their eyes were so black. It must be something in the brain that maybe triggers the pupils to just explode. I don't know what's
It
going
has
on
to
there.
be.
There's no white, no color, no nothing, just black. And his face was ropey. It had like veins and ropes, and his teeth. I could see the bottom teeth, I guess. I think they got him in Florida with his dental records. I could see why they were all crooked. And
Now, I guess one of the other things that I have to ask is if anybody else ever found themselves in a situation similar to that, would there be any kind of advice that you could even give them to kind of keep in the back of their mind if they end up in a situation like that?
I would just say if you think somebody's not telling the truth or saying they're a lifeguard and they're not, or even if somebody, pops out of nowhere, get away. Don't don't hang around. they could be the nicest people in the world, but just trust your gut.
Yeah, it usually doesn't lie to you.
Absolutely. And I did try to trust mine. I just didn't feel comfortable with him. I knew something was off. Something's off. Something's off. The whole time I'm like, something's wrong. I mean, he came out of the woods for crying out loud. And I just thought, run, run. But he just was everywhere I was, he was in front of me.
Now,
He,
have you ever thought about if he hadn't chosen you or if he hadn't set his sights on you, who else he might have went after or what might have happened when in a situation like that?
you know, he was, I noticed, really tan. And it's hard to get a tan out here in Washington State.
I would imagine.
So I think that was probably a place where he was laying and in the sun or the reflection of the water. And maybe I was opportunity. He saw the opportunity and he took it. I don't know if he was actively looking for somebody that day or he was like, yay, you know, I caught a fish in the net.
Yeah, you never know. I
I
mean,
think,
people like that, it's really hard to tell what they're thinking, what goes through their mind, their thought process. But I mean, it's really creepy because you don't know how things could have ended up.
well, I do think that he was prepared at all times to kill. Even when they found him, I think Carol Dorange, I mean, they found his car filled with, ski
Oh
masks and
yeah, he had entire
all.
kits basically in his car.
Yeah, so back in 1967, he was 21 years old when I was 14. So he came prepared with a whistle. I mean, he didn't really have anything else. He had on khaki shorts and I think flip flops or some kind of sandals. I'm sorry, but that's all he had. I mean, but I guess that's all he
I mean,
needed.
it shows that he was at least
Maybe.
prepared to if he encountered somebody.
Hmm. Hmm. So I was lucky that I was a good swimmer, that I could hold my breath underwater longer than almost anybody else, and that I had the wits about me to think about what happened in summer camp that got me to thinking, play dead and not give up on my life. I mean, there was one point where I said to myself, just breathe in, die, just kill yourself because you're not going to live. And then, your whole life starts, what's my mom going to do? And I thought about this too. What would my mom have thought if he had drowned me and then just bolted back into the woods? She would have thought, what did she do? She fell off the dock. She hit her head. What did she
Yeah,
do? She would have,
nobody would have ever
I
known.
mean, they would have known. No, they wouldn't have known. She would have thought I just drowned. And that's why I think we need to look into cold cases of, young girls that have drowned out here on the West Coast and, things like that happen to him because this guy came out of nowhere. I mean, when you come out of the woods like you're some kind of animal, you are an
Yeah, and it
animal.
definitely makes you think that he had done it, you know, even if not plenty of times before, that it wasn't his first time.
Oh no. So if he killed that little girl in 1961 is where I'm leaning. If he had killed her for sure, then what was he doing between 61 and 67?
Most people
That
don't
was 6
Yeah, most
years.
people don't do it once, then stop, then start up again, you know, 13
Exactly.
years later. I mean, I kind of
Right.
feel like there's a big gap in that time range where he was doing a lot of things and it just maybe bodies weren't turning up, people weren't noticing, people were looking for something completely different because he didn't fit the mold
Mhm.
of any kind of serial killer. He was intelligent,
No.
he was well dressed, He presented himself well. He was kind of, um, together in terms of, kind of being known as running around with local politicians. And I mean, he was fairly connected. I mean, people knew the guy. So it's kind of like in the sense of Gacy, he was the same way, except he had a completely different side to him that people kind of knew about earlier on. But Bundy, I mean,
Mhm,
there's a large part of his life that's kind of unaccounted for when it comes to the crimes.
mhm. I agree, and I'd like to see somebody look into this. I've actually tried to go back and find missing persons and things, but there doesn't seem to be a anywhere. And I was
Oh,
hoping maybe, we could find some girls that were missing or, uh, I mean, he liked to kill kids too. I
yeah.
know a lot of several, 3 12-year olds,
Yeah.
8-year old, you know. Um,
And I mean, we might not ever know the extent of how sick he actually was. We only know the people that they recovered and all that, but there's,
mhm.
who knows what nobody knows about.
Well, the little girl from 1961, they never found. So
No.
I'd like to see a list of missing persons or suspicious deaths or something. Some, I think that section of his life needs to be investigated.
I completely agree because there's probably a lot of people that never got answers back then.
Yeah. Well, in my little town, we had two back in the 60s, 50s. We had two police officers that came on duty at 8 o'clock, went off at 4:30, and that was it. They had to come out of the county if you needed somebody. So it wasn't like they
Uh,
kept, like a lot of records and stuff.
mhm.
But I wish, I hope and pray somebody will stop making these posts. Well, Ted Bundy started killing in 1974. Knock it off.
Yeah, nobody
He didn't.
knows. I mean, that can't really be I mean, they know based on the evidence that they found, but nobody knows beyond that. I mean, that's not really a factual statement because nobody knows. He could have started in 1961. He could have, it could have been an ongoing thing and just nobody figured it out until later on.
Well, from what I looked into serial killers, they don't just go. I think I'm waking up this morning and I'm just going to go on a serial killing binge and just kill women across the country
Mhm.
and and be that good at it.
Yeah.
They practice.
Well, yeah, and they seem to
They
not be
practice.
able to help it either. So if they have these urges and instincts, that's not something that seems easy for them to shut off.
Right. And to see his face back in 1967 as that warped and that demented and uh, like demonic, it was completely demonic. That's the only word I have for it. There's something wrong in his brain.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know whether he was born that way, somebody dropped him on his head. I don't know what the heck happened to him, but there was something inside of him that was just pure evil.
Well, and he didn't come
And
from the normal situation of people that end up doing that stuff, so it would have been nice to have had a little more information as to what caused him to do that.
Mhm.
There's really not a lot of information out there. In the interviews that he gave, he was very vague with his answers.
They were his little secrets, I guess.
Maybe so. I mean, a lot of secrets that he took with him, and it's unfortunate that that happened.
There's also a lot of women they've pretty much proved that he killed, but he wouldn't admit it.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, and I kinda wonder if,
And
once they put him to death, if maybe they just kind of let it go. I mean, you'd think that they would still investigate missing persons and
mhm.
all that kind of stuff, but it makes you wonder. It's like once they caught him and put him to death, did they just kind of say, "We're just gonna kinda put them in a cold case file, we're not gonna worry about it." we're not gonna look into it
Mhm.
anymore.
I do know a lot of people have written books and have done podcasts and videos and all kinds of things about Bundy later on,
Mhm.
but not one of them has ever talked about 1960s versus
No,
1974. None of them.
and it would be nice to see a
And
little bit more of that.
well, I'd like to see somebody dig into it. I don't have, I mean, I'd love to help out. I just don't have the ability to get into the files like other people do.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, I think that they would find all
Um,
kinds of different things that maybe they were expected, maybe they weren't, but I definitely think there's a lot more things that could be uncovered out there.
there's a lot of small towns around here that I'm sure that kids just vanished from. He was everywhere too. When I read Ann's book, I was like, he talked about being places that I was like, wow, nobody goes there unless they know the state, but like the back of their
Mhm.
hand. Um, like he was just everywhere. He
Yeah,
was in Seattle. He was in Sammamish. He was down in Oregon. He was in Olympia. He was in Tacoma. He was
and even
everywhere out
beyond
here.
that, I mean, Idaho, Colorado, New Jersey,
Mhm.
Florida, I mean,
You-
he was everywhere.
mhm. And when he took his trip across the country, when he went to Florida, I don't think he flew, did
I
he?
don't think so, I feel like he drove.
And if he did,
What happened along the
how
way?
many states? Yeah, what happened along the
I think
way?
there's
I want to hear.
a lot of things out there that we'll never have the answer to, sadly.
Yeah. Well, I guess if we dig deep enough, I think everything can be solved to satisfaction eventually.
Yeah, and hopefully there will be people that'll continue, looking into some of this stuff even after, even with this many years past, if there's still a lot of questions out there, it would still be nice to see things get answered.
Hmm. For sure.
So one of the other things I
I
wanted
want
to
to.
ask you too is, you actually found my page because of, I had visited Alcatraz East Crime Museum in Pigeon Forge, where they have Ted Bundy's VW. How do you feel about things like that being displayed?
I think. I think they should keep them. I actually. It triggered me a little bit.
I would imagine
That's
that.
what I commented, and I saw the Volkswagen. Like, it's almost like he's not still alive, is he? For a second. But I think these things need to be preserved
Absolutely. I mean,
and not be.
I mean, it's even though it's dark, it's history, and people need to remember the things that happened. People need to be able to learn from things that have happened, whether they be good or bad. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that may
Right.
never know what happened with a lot of these people, and I mean, just for the sake of the victims, keeping their, um, you
Mhm.
know, keeping them alive.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I mean, they try to erase like World War II
Yeah,
history, Hitler, all that
and
stuff.
you can't
That
do
stuff
it.
should be saved. You've got to save that
Yeah, I
stuff
mean,
so it never.
just erasing things and getting rid of artifacts, it doesn't take away what actually happened. And
Taken
if
down.
any of that stuff can help people in the future understand why people did the things that they did, I mean, that seems like a pretty good
Mhm.
reason to hang on to it.
I'll tell you, I'd like to go see that Volkswagen.
It's
Although he didn't know that in
no,
1967.
but it's pretty bone chilling to even walk by it. Just because you know what's happened, you look at it and it's got the door handle missing and the seat missing, and you just look in it and some of the things that happened in it, but nobody probably knows everything. but it's chilling because you walk around a corner and that's the first thing that you see, and it stops you in your tracks. It's
I had no idea it
you
existed.
know, it was in
It's so
private hands for a while, and then a musician bought it for his personal collection, and then it ended up at Alcatraz East, and I would imagine they're probably not gonna get rid of it anytime soon, but it's definitely a weird thing to see in person.
I think I'd like to see it so I know it's real. He was
Mhm.
real. The people were
Yeah, I
real.
definitely understand that.
We were all I don't know if that
Yeah,
makes
it
sense,
does.
but
You know, in some way, maybe some small type of closure or something
yeah,
like that.
well, I'd like to see his ashes, that would be closure. But
Yeah, I'm not sure where those actually even are. I know they
oh,
have the state cemetery up here by, where they executed him, but he's not in that cemetery.
well, his request was for his ashes to be spread in the Cascade Mountains where he murdered and left the bodies of all those people, all
Oh,
those
geez,
women.
that seems a little inappropriate.
It does. So I just read something else. I've been doing research since I said I would do this with you, that the ashes are buried somewhere by his family, but they won't say where it is. I don't know.
No, that's understandable.
I don't think he should be scattered where he threw his victims.
No, absolutely not.
And
So,
yeah.
I guess,
I
is there anything else that you would like to, mention or bring up just in case there's anybody watching this that has the ability to do anything with any of these cold cases or look into anything?
oh, I would love for them to contact me and I'll if you don't want to dig into it, I will. I want to know what happened in the 60s. I want
Yeah,
to
and I
know.
guess if anybody happens to see this that wants to get involved, leave a comment on this video, and if Connie would like wants to keep an eye on comments, or I can reach out to me and I can relay the message. But if there's anything that anybody that wants to help get involved in this, please reach out.
Yeah, I think the only closure we're ever going to get is when we know the full
Oh
truth,
yeah,
and that
yeah, absolutely.
happened long before
I
1974.
believe so too. I mean, there's a long period of time there that nobody seems to know anything about, and there has to be some history in there.
I'm probably I know there are survivors of Ted
Mhm.
Bundy, but most of them were just horrifically injured, like had their heads caved in and blinded or whatever. It's just horrible
Yeah.
things. But I'm probably the only one I know from the 60s.
Yeah, it's the only one I've heard of because, I mean, people don't talk about the '60s or anything about that, so it's really interesting that, to have this perspective because it's not out there. So I definitely appreciate
No,
you
it's
sharing
not.
the story with us.
I think it's a conversation we need to open up.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about him, what where he was in the
I
60s.
agree. So yeah, if anybody has
You know,
any knowledge of this or wants to get involved, please reach out.
thank
Yeah,
you.
well, thank you for joining us, Connie, and I appreciate the strength and courage in telling this story.
I have to admit, it made me nervous.
I understand that. I would be too.